We are live, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm good morning. I see that many of you have joined. We'll just take a few more minutes, perhaps a couple of minutes, and we'll wait for some more participants to join us. And then we'll commence formally at around 11:01. Before we commence, ma'am, can you just do one final audio check, Professor Deborah?
Yeah. Satyam, are you able to hear me?
Yes, clear.
All right.
Crystal clear.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. So we are at 11:01. So Professor Deborah, with your permission, if I may commence.
Sure. Let's begin with the
right. So a very warm good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. And interdisciplinary education has been a buzzword for a while, and one gets which keeps getting thrown around a lot. But what does it mean, and why is it so desirable? What are the merits and challenges? We are going to have an exciting session today, and we'll be talking about the theme, which is the interdisciplinary education. Now, this term seems to be a modern term for most of you, but let me tell you, it has an historical antecedent right from the Greek philosophy, wherein we had the idea of unified science, general knowledge, synthesis, to the holistic learning and growth that have been described in Vedas and Puranas. In fact, one of the great examples that we find is 7th century prose writer Ban Bhatt, who wrote Kadambaris, very famous piece, and wherein he illustrated how an effective and impactful education system needs to have 66 kalas or 66 arts, which includes vocation. Now, again, if we go back to the medieval times and we see the golden era of the Arab Islamic Empire, we see that the scholarship had a high degree of interdisciplinary approach, intercultural, interfaith cohesion towards their scholarship. Now, since the last couple of years, this term has specially found mention in our conversation because the government of India launched its policy, which is the National Education Policy. And many of us understand increasingly that the backbone of this policy is to promote the interdisciplinarity, to reduce or to eliminate the hard lines between the discipline. Similarly, at the same time, when the National Education Policy was launched, in fact, it was primarily an amendment to a series of policies that we have had. It's just that this time it was more robust and it got everybody's attention. So along with this report, we also had World Economic Forum's Future of Job reports of 2020, wherein a lot of things were mentioned, but when it comes to the top skills for the professionals, critical thinking, problem solving, tolerance, resilience, flexibilities, these were the qualities which were highlighted. And these are precisely the quality which an interdisciplinary mode of learning and education seems to be propagating. But we'll go in detail because we have two very erudite speakers. In fact, I would say that we have a very diverse panel today. We have Professor Mercy Deborah, who is the professor at the Jindal Global Law School and is the Vice Dean of Admissions and Outreach. She has studied law throughout her career. She studied law and history in her graduation. from New Delhi, from Delhi University. And then she went on to study her post-graduation on a merit scholarship from the Indian Law Institute, ILI, New Delhi. And then for her PhD, she went to NLUD, which is the National Law University of Delhi. And she specializes on a diverse law, such as family law, consumer law, technology law, and also the regulation of pharmaceutical laws. Now we have Professor Zara Hasnan on your screen. She's a very young professor. She's very exciting, and she has worked. In fact, one of the best thing about this session today is that she's an alumni of the OP Jindal Global University. She graduated 6 years ago from the Jindal University. She had her education in public policy, and after that, she went and worked on ground at a very intense level with two key ministries whose policy impact the livelihood of each one of us. The Ministry of the Housing and Urban Affairs, where she was working on the Smart City project. And I'm sure you must by now, because it's a very popular term, you know about the smart cities. Prior to that, she worked with the Ministry of Sanitation and Drinking Water, wherein she was working with the policymakers and people on the ground to implement the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So now with that brief introduction, ladies and gentlemen, we'll straight away jump into the panel discussion, and we'll invite the panelists to have a discussion. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that this is going to be an interactive session. This is a session which has been designed for you, and we would encourage you to keep it as untidy as possible. Ask any question that you want to on the particular theme. Ask questions that you may perhaps have for our university, our programs, and we have our teams at the back end to answer those questions. And if there are questions particular to the theme, we have a very erudite and very diverse set of panelists over here. So for the first question now, I would move towards the first panelist, Professor Mercy Debra, whom I have introduced you very briefly. Is that, ma'am, tell us and the audience, why do we require an interdisciplinary approach to education, and what are the components of this particular approach? Over to you, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much, Satyam, and a very warm welcome to all our participants who've been tuning in and joining for this session on interdisciplinarity, the potential and impact that it has in the education sector. Now, to specifically address this question at the outset, I really want, Satyam did set out, the context in which we are sort of bringing this discussion on interdisciplinarity approaches in the education sector. And while India has had a history of, having interdisciplinary approaches in education, when, such as having a holistic growth at some of their earlier schools. But for some reason, it does seems a little, a little perplexing as to why we need to time and again underscore the need for having an interdisciplinary approach in our education system. And somewhere, although consciously or subconsciously, our education policy makers have endeavored over the past 75 years to somehow ensure that a holistic or a synergistic approach to education is undertaken from time to time. But somehow we've missed the bus because our education system has evolved in such a way that most disciplines or areas of concentration see at our universities, including at our schools, seem to develop in silos. So you will have a geology department that may be situated away from a mechanical engineering department. So it is very important that in our education industry sector, and particularly the government of India has again drawn and underscored the importance of interdisciplinary approaches in our education system, particularly through the rollout of the national education policy. But before we sort of get on to our discussion over the next hour with all of you, with both Professor Zara Hasnan and myself, wanted to sort of underscore and highlight why is it that we are not just scheduling such a session on interdisciplinary approaches in education, but why is it that as students, as prospective students who are looking to pursue undergraduate degrees, why is it that you should be looking at universities and at centers of learning, which really give thrust to an interdisciplinary approach? And the answer is extremely simple, because real life problems have fair amount of complexity, which require different kinds of problem solving skills. And unless your classrooms or your centers of learning and teaching do not have a sort of a synergistic learning, which not just presents a certain theme or a certain area through the multifaceted, perspectives, multiple perspectives, it'll be difficult for our students, prospective students and current students and future students to sort of be able to acquire the set of skills that are required to deal with real world, real time problems. And so the discussion that we're getting back to the drawing boards today, and which has also been sort of caught the spotlight in the education sector, is that we really need to now make an effort, a very strong effort to ensure that there is a synergistic learning and an integrative approach to knowledge and experiences that we bring to our classrooms. So to ensure that the students are able to grapple with the real world problems. So something like, just to give an example, how interdisciplinary approach really works out, and in, let's say, the technology industry or in other sectors. So I was a couple of years ago, I was watching this documentary about the founder of the famous tech company Apple, and its late founder Steve Jobs. Sometime in the 80s and 90s, when tech companies were evolving their prototypes of computers and other gadgets. Most of us who've seen the transition from the 20th century to the 21st century are quite aware of how our gadgets looked, unappealing, though you can't discount the functionality of those gadgets altogether. But here was a founder of a tech company who, sort of saw through that, unless technology was, married to design and other, the elements of design, color were brought into technology, the technology wouldn't sell or wouldn't have that kind of attraction or, saleability. So, in companies, in his company, he brought in, designers to design various gadgets, which then, of course, most of us are aware of the success story that some of these tech companies had post the 2000. And the kind of gadgets that we now receive, are extremely appealing, not just in colors, but here are some of the things that an interdisciplinary approach to not just education but work life, requires a synergistic learning process and working process whereby you're able to mesh different kinds of approaches to learning and utilize them in resolving real-time work-related problems as well as real-time issues that come from time to time.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was some fantastic opening points. In fact, synergy is what we are talking about. And as we talk about moving towards a more holistic way of learning, this is where I would like Professor Zara to come in and perhaps talk about what are the challenges, if we look, what are the challenges of traditional form of learning, which are, I leave it up to you how you go about it, but usually we are trying to transition towards an interdisciplinary approach. So could you perhaps highlight some of the challenges that are there in the traditional form of learning and teaching as well?
Thank you, Mr. Satyam, for this question. And a very good morning to the people who are listening us, to the audience. And Professor Deborah has given us a quite insight of what interdisciplinary is and how it is useful to us. So the question posed to me is the challenges of traditional approach. I would like to answer it in a way that the content of education has been changing as our societies have been evolving with time, but the purpose of education remains the same, that the students must be able to think and learn. Now, the purpose of education is also to make the students realize the world around them. The world doesn't consist of subjects in isolation, different discipline. World is just an amalgamation of all the subjects we have. To reiterate what I just meant, I would like our audience to take a minute and think as I go upon saying, so just imagine a blank sheet of paper having one circle. That circle signifies computer science. Let's imagine computer science. So a student pursuing computer science is in this circle. Obviously, he'll have knowledge, method, he'll understand the concepts, he'll be very good in technology for that matter. But all of us can see there is a restricted boundary where a student is standing somewhere in between. Now, there is a situation B where we can imagine like a Venn diagram, there are two circles, one representing computer science, the other, let's say, sociology. So a student who has acquired knowledge of computer science and now having the knowledge of, say, sociology of how the society works will have a better understanding of analyzing the society and problem solving. We talk about education. So the total purpose of education is when the students go out in the world, they should be able to solve the problem. And in the 21st century, we are having complex problems like climate change, pollution, and so forth and so on. Now that can't be understood with one particular discipline. You need to understand what society is. It will help a student identify what the problem is, and therefore they can give some solution to it. So with this example of mine, I really wanted the participants to think over, as in a computer science graduate will be very good in making, let's say, an application. But if he doesn't know what actually the societal problem is, will that app will be useful? I leave that question on the audience. Think over it. It won't. Whereas in the situation B, a student who has acquired the knowledge of sociology will be able to identify the problem and propose solution in his or her own way, and which will have a good impact on the society itself. So disciplinary approach have a certain set of questions where students look for answer, whereas in interdisciplinary, students get a chance to explore their interests, to understand world in a holistic manner, which is quite missing in disciplinary approach. And given the era we are living in, we definitely don't need silos to be there. We need interdisciplinarity. So I hope I have made my point clear to the audience by this example itself.
Yeah, I hope, and I definitely believe you have fairly covered this part. And in fact, for most of the discipline that have evolved over the period of time, they did not evolve in silos. They had to be paired. Just give me a second. So they had to be paired with a lot of discipline to evolve. So now that we have Professor Mercy, I would turn towards her and ask her to highlight the importance of an interdisciplinary approach vis-a-vis critical thinking.
All right. Thank you for that question, Satyam. And many of us as educators have been over the past few years that most of us have been for quite some time in the education sector. And one of the most important thing that we see that our students, find it difficult to acquire a certain set of skills, especially in India, we are pretty much trained in rote learning. And one of the things that we as educators, particularly over the past few years, even the Indian policy makers have been striving to undertake is to change the curriculum in such a way that we really are not training our students to become academic bulimics who simply chew and spew in their paper. but to also develop critical thinking skills whereby from what they have learned, they are able to apply and engage in problem solving abilities, or able to critique and understand what are the problems which lie with a certain issue at hand. So in that context, interdisciplinary approach is extremely critical, because it sort of not just helps the student throws them into a situation in a classroom setting or in a field setting, if the curriculum has been designed for them to have also some sort of an experiential or field-based learning, is to force them to connect the grid lines, identify the knowledge gaps, and work out the possible solution or suggest viable solutions. So in other words, what interdisciplinary thinking essentially does is it forces the students to develop the cognitive, abilities whereby they are able to develop a diverse perspective techniques and integrate, let's say if it's something to deal with students who are studying environmental or ecological studies. The current spotlight is on climate change, and sure enough, why not? Because climate change is not something that purely concerns and is to be taught and is to be understood and is to be, minds need to be put together mainly when it concerns environmental studies, because it is something that, affects all at hand, everybody. So, something like a problem like climate change would require require teaching in your classrooms, not just, when you teach environmental law. A law school will require definitely policy sort of interventions that also need to be discussed when discussing climate change and other law and policy interventions. So interdisciplinary approaches to teaching and learning, develop the cognitive sensibilities of students. Also, interdisciplinary approaches are absolutely quintessential now to our education system, because it is not possible to teach any subject in silos or through very limited subject-based lens. Because invariably there are so many gray areas in any issue which a subject is sort of trying to seek to impart to its students, or an area or an issues that come up in the course of a program or area of concentration. So there's a lot of scope for ambiguities while dealing with issues when one is teaching students. And it is very important, those as gaps or those gray areas for which you simply don't have answers, or let me put it like this, you run out of colors in a palette to give answers to your students. And so it is very important as educators to inculcate or bring into the classroom interdisciplinary teaching, because you require different you require alternative perspectives while addressing certain problems while teaching a certain subject area. So, which is one of the things. And another important thing that interdisciplinary approach sort of dispels, I would say, is a lot of us when we address issues related to our respective subject areas. So I may be teaching law, another faculty maybe pursuing, or a student may be pursuing public policy, business, architecture, but there are issues which, if we strictly look at it, issues through the lens of our training and whatever professional experience, then it sort of feeds into our biases and preconceived notions that we may have about a certain issue. But the moment you introduce or you expose a person, which is why interdisciplinary approaches would also mandate university spaces or centers of educational learning to have flexible student group settings, or to have faculty who represent a whole host of other perspectives and subject areas, whereby you're able to challenge your preconceived notions on a certain area. So this kind of a synergistic learning is very important, because when students or when people who undertake professional courses go into their field, they are able to realize, like a commercial lawyer would invariably be required to have some kind of a basic understanding of how to at least read a balance sheet. All right. A chartered accountant would invariably be required to at least be acquainted with what are the tax-related laws and regulations. An architect would have to necessarily be well acquainted with what are the urban planning policies, or what are the bylaws in a particular municipality or in a particular state. So you have to, or also an architect will have to be conscious of what are the ecological challenges that one has to bring in while designing spaces. So interdisciplinarity sort of pushes a person to stretch their minds, connect the grid lines, and develop those kind of cognitive abilities, which help them in dealing with not just everyday problems, but also providing viable solutions to simple as well as complex everyday problems.
Thank you so much, ma'am. You've highlighted quite a range of issues and benefits that are connected to interdisciplinary learning. And I really like the point about how we are actually moving towards a more complex era, wherein not only we have technological advancement, but we're also having a need for a sustainable growth, which is where I think we would move towards Professor Hasnain. So Professor Hasnain, you've already worked on a couple of projects, and while you would be on the ground, you would have understood how, as a professional, you need to have multiple skills. But I would not ask you that question. The question that I want to ask you right now is that when we understand the importance of an interdisciplinary approach, but as long as it is not in the system where there are regulatory frameworks, it would perhaps not be as impactful. So could you please throw some light in terms of the policies that we have had or we do have right now, and how are they guiding us towards an interdisciplinary ecosystem of learning and teaching?
Thank you so much for that question. And it gives me all the instincts of public policy now talking for this particular theme. So thanks for that question. Definitely, recently a more talked about policy, that is National Education Policy of 2020, highlights holistic and multidisciplinary approach so that the students can have critical learning. It emphasizes on socio-emotional learning of the students, and particularly developing soft skills in students as well. So when we talk about multidisciplinarity or interdisciplinary, NEP has a lot to talk about it. They are focusing a lot, and they want all the institutions to follow the particular set of things which they are mentioning in the policy. So to start with, NEP highlights the integration of arts and humanities with what we call STEMs. So that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which will eventually have positive learning outcome. When I say positive learning outcome, it is more to do with critical thinking, problem solving, and they suggest that it will lead to more of innovation and creativity in students. So much so that National Education Policy even talks about engineering institutions like IITs to have more holistic approach towards education by imbibing more of humanities and arts in their institution, particularly, and ask the students who are pursuing arts and humanities to get engaged with the subjects like sciences, and consciously taking up with vocational subjects and soft skills development too. Now, national education policy also blurs the boundaries which are pre-existing in our system right now. When I say that, I do mean that they are giving students an opportunity to frame, design their discipline in a more creative manner. Wherever, whichever discipline they like or their interest lies, they can make their curriculum accordingly and have multiple entry and exit points. So that's a very, very innovative form which has come into this policy. More so, the National Education Policy talks about higher educational institutions to have departments like languages, literature, music, and economics, sociology, and sciences, these departments to be there where students should be able to have multidisciplinary approach. If the higher education institutions are not having these departments, they should have some online arrangement where students who want to pursue can pursue these courses. And policy even talks about giving the credits in all the bachelor's program when students complete any of these courses in their bachelor's program. National education policy also talks about having in credit-based systems in higher education institutions to the courses related to community engagement and integration, value-based education, environmental education, so that Indian education system must be some which has not only knowledge, thematic knowledge, but also value-based knowledge, and our students are going to be transiting into a good, sustainable societies where they are going to be like. It also talks about the practical aspect which students should get, handholding supports in the university in the form of internships where they can work with the local artisan or local industry, whichever is available, as well as research institutions, so that students get to know the real field and will have acquire skill which they can use in the research as well. What attracted me the most was the idea of global citizenship education also, when it is national education policy talks about it in multidisciplinary approach, that our students should get to know the global issues and challenges, and students must be able to be the promoters of peace, tolerant, inclusive society. So that was really nice point which I found in national education policy, and I would like to get it over here. And this policy is so much so enthusiastic with the multidisciplinary approach that it even suggests to have Miru universities. Now, what is Miru? Miru stands for multidisciplinary education and research universities, which will be at par like IITs and IIMs and will strengthen this approach across the nation. So yes, we have regulatory frameworks and the policies talking more about this, and definitely it will take time, but when we have things in place, it will fall down to every institution and students will get the opportunity to get the learning from this kind of approach. Over to you, Satyam.
Well, thank you. You have actually you have detailed out all the elements which I was going to ask you at the later stage, but then again, it actually makes the way for the next question that perhaps I would ask Professor Deborah to throw a light on. Now that we have the policy in place, in fact, Professor, we also have a question, and if we have your permission, we'd like to combine this question and the next question that I'm going to ask you. It's basically to do with the instructional strategies. In the light of this interdisciplinary approach. Now, Marina Murad, who is one of our participant in this seminar, she has asked, as her question is, what are the facilities to apply this approach to grade 9 at school? So she, and I think we can skip that grade 9 and we can holistically talk about the school. And perhaps you can club these two and answer this part, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Satyam, and a great question from Marina, from our audience who's joined us. So, as educators, we've been quite confounded for a long time as to how to bring more creative and synergistic approaches to our classrooms. I mean, let me be very candid about it. Most of us have, being born and brought up in India, we've had to sort of attune ourselves and adjust ourselves to a system where we supposed to, acquaint ourselves with a rote learning system, which requires us to, put certain marks on the board without really, giving sufficient leeway or, ensuring that what are the other modes in which we're quantifying learning and application. So over the past few years, of course, our education boards, such as the Central Board for Secondary Education and a lot of other state boards and other kinds of boards that also are there, have undergone metamorphosis in the kind of changes that have been brought to the curriculum. But we're still far from seeing, us throwing all the rules to the winds and saying that, at the end of the day, let's look at what sort of integrative approaches we can bring to the classroom in terms of also the activities that can be undertaken instead of simply having a monologue in the class where, typically in our education system, professors or school teachers deliver the lecture without there being any scope for interaction and also sort of, ensuring that there's sufficient time to do activity work whereby the student is able to apply what they've learned in their application. Something as simple as I wish I had in my mathematics class back in school, which is if I was taught, trigonometry, which has so much of value, let's say, in subjects like architecture. I wish I was taught about or shapes or geometrical shapes. I wish there was some mode by which we were taught about how such mathematical or geometrical study of shapes and formulas and trigonometric principles would apply in real time in real space. All right. So there is still a lack of imagination as to how to make some of these maths at the end of the day is a language. And while some of us, including me, might be arithmetically a bit challenged, but we really aspired that, there would be some educator or a teacher, and they did, definitely. There were teachers who worked hard to change the education, our learning process. But we really wish there was some kind of an imagination, a creative and a new imagination that was brought into the classroom to make sometimes dry concepts but important, nonetheless important subjects such as mathematics a little more, impactful. So there it is. Here it is. We grapple with the problem because as educators, both Sarah and I would agree that this is our everyday problem that we are confounded with as we go to teach in our classrooms, because we're thinking of how is it that we can make ensure that a concept that we are teaching in class translates and the student finds its meaning in a certain context. So in terms of instructional strategies that I would there could be a myriad of instructional strategies, and I'm no real expert and I wouldn't want to claim to be an expert. But based from my experience and what most of us, my colleagues at our university and my colleagues in this education sector would say, is that we at the outset really need to spend time at conceptualizing our teaching strategy and our subjects. When we say conceptualizing, we really need to get down to the drawing board and see what is it in terms of the concepts, the subject area that we're teaching, what aspects of the subject are extremely important and that need to be conveyed from an educational standpoint. So the way we design our curriculum needs to be revisited again and again. And I'm sure, most educational boards in India, as well as universities, do have academic review boards and systems in place which audit a curriculum and spend time in curriculum designing. But I think as educators, we really need to spend more time in how we conceive and conceptualize our curriculums. Because there it is, because the curriculum once designed constitutes and forms the edifice on the basis of which thousands and scores of students would be learning from the manner in which a curriculum is designed by a board or by a university, or for that matter, even a professor who's teaching and specializes in a certain subject which is taught at a particular university. So if you get your conceptualization of a curriculum, absolutely, if it's faulty, then your very superstructure on which you are, making, setting out concepts and, delivering your lectures and expecting students to have some kind of a formative assessment would be absolutely flawed, because then the edifice itself is pretty shaky. The second important thing that I feel that is very important when we talk about instructional, and here it is with what I say, conceptualizing of a curriculum is so important, because you also need to see what sort of synergistic learning processes that you can integrate into your curriculum, because which sort of ensures that students are well apprised about various facets of a certain issue or a problem which the subject seeks to impart instruction to them. The second important thing that I really feel is we a lot of times fail to, once we teach a certain concept, we really need to spend time explaining to the student and contextualizing that particular concept. So one needs to really spend time, let's say if we were teaching about, something, the problems with the backlog of arrears in a court system. It would be very important not just to set out these facts, but also to say why is it and what is the context behind why there is a backlog of arrears in the Indian courts. All right. So it's very important to contextualize the problem to enable the students to then develop cognitive sensibilities or capacities to see what ways they can find out to address problems which have been brought forth or set out by the educator or a course instructor. So which brings me to my third strategy, which is we as educators or universities or centers of learning or schools, educational boards in the country must move towards a more problem-centric solving strategies of teaching in our classrooms, because unless if we continue to just restrict ourselves to a style of teaching which is more in the format of a monologue, our students are soon going to check out or snooze out from their classes. So it is very important not just to conceptualize a curriculum properly, to contextualize it for the students, and third, to also integrate problem solving or problem centering issues and into our curriculum too, so that students are able to increasingly appreciate the same thing that I said. I wish somebody had really explained why we were, why trigonometry was taught in mathematics classes. If somebody had taught that why we require it in everyday life, and you see the usage or the application of geometric symbols and other tools in your everyday life, we would learn to appreciate it better. So it is very important to undertake conceptualization properly, contextualizing and problem centering while teaching our students.
It's very interesting. You said I'm no expert, but then you went on to elaborate and illustrate so effectively and highlighted such important points. And I think, ma'am, what it would be effective is that we perhaps take a case study. In fact, what we have seen as per the QS World Ranking, as the number of Indian universities transitioning into and making a mark in those rankings is on the rise, and it is indeed an evidence as how the education institution across India, especially the private institutions, are making some mega efforts to incorporate integrated and interdisciplinary approach. In fact, what Professor Hasnain was pointing out, that the policy, in fact, so OP Jindal University is an institution of eminence, and being an institution of eminence, there are a range of things that it needs to incorporate, which also is talked about in the national education policy of having higher discipline of research centers. Now, ma'am, I would like you to take a case study, perhaps OP Jindal University, and throw some light as to how this particular element has been or is still being, what is the status of its implementation? Could you throw some light on the OP Jindal University's model?
Thank you, Satyam, because also one of the purpose of us hosting this particular session for our audience members and prospective students is also to say drive home the point of what has been our experience at OP Jindal Global University with this incorporating interdisciplinary approach in our curriculums and in our classrooms. And so we'd be really happy to share, and I'm sure there are a lot of universities and schools which do that consciously or subconsciously. But we would be also happy to share specific ways in which we have been, emphasizing and bringing home this aspect of interdisciplinary approach. And my colleague, Professor Hasnain, would then, share a couple of her experiences to this entire, this process of creating a synergistic approach to teaching and learning. So one of the things that we have been consciously doing since the time this university was started and established was to ensure that there is not all the departments, quite literally and figuratively, we are quite conscious of bringing and ensuring that there is rolling out of an interdisciplinary approach in our classrooms. And to begin with, even before I say that, we literally do it, to start with, even the manner in which we've designed our, university spaces is such that there is no department which, lies in some quarter of the university. We have one academic block with 12 schools, and which have been designed in such a way that there is a continuous cross-pollination of ideas which takes place between students from different schools as well as faculty members from different schools. So quite literally, we do ensure that there is a space created for an interdisciplinary approaches whereby we can have sharing of ideas on various subject areas. But one thing that we do, a couple of things that we do, I would want to discuss over the next 5 minutes is how we do our curriculum. How does our curriculum necessarily incorporate an interdisciplinary approach? The second is I would talk about is how through certain other range of offerings and programs, which essentially includes outbound or exchange programs, that we ensure that our students have a broad perspective in a particular subject area or an area of specialization, which kindles their interest. And also the third aspect would be how we insist on experiential learning to ensure, because that is also knowledge when integrated with experience, brings a very diverse set of multifaceted perspective on a certain subject area. So the first thing, and if you're there joining us, you would see, on your screen that at OP Jindal Global University, we have a host of electives which are specific to certain schools. We have more than 560 core courses, more than 500 elective courses which are offered by specific schools. But the most interesting part, which is we are deeply rooted in interdisciplinarity, is because through the cross-listed elective courses that we have more than now 300 cross-listed electives whereby students from one particular school or a department can enroll and, gain insights into a subject area which either is not strictly related to their to their degree, but nonetheless is something that really kindles their interest and that they would like to cultivate some kind of an insight into that area. So let me just give you, to drive home to explicate this particular position, let me just give you an example. So let's say you have a student from studying journalism and media studies at the Jindal School of Journalism and Communications. And such a student, because currently we have issues in the media sector which surround both in social media as well as the media sector, the broadcast as well as the print industry, on issues surrounding regulation of our media. For so many decades, we've had the media and both in various formats, whether it's a print or the broadcast and now the social media format, which is pretty much primarily self-regulated. But because of the changes that technology also brings in and the kind of effects that have to be reined in, some of the negative effects of having news and other kind of content being put in certain social media platforms, there's an increasing talk about having regulation of the media industry or certain platforms. And so it is equally important for a student who's being trained in journalism or communications to also be well versed with the regulations which apply in this sector. So a student who's otherwise, has to do a range of mandatory courses in journalism and media studies would, if they want to study about law and regulations in the media industry, would register or for a media law course, which is offered at the law school. All right. Likewise, if you had, let's say, a student who wanted a student of architecture who wants to study about urban planning or urban public policy, would decide to study, enroll for a course which may be offered by a faculty member from the public policy school. So in such a case, you have not just cross-pollination of ideas which takes place, a flexible student setting, but you develop multiple perspectives on a given problem. So in this case, we've had a very successful experience with the cross-elective system, which sort of offers an interdisciplinary approach. Not that interdisciplinary approach is not rooted in our everyday classroom settings, but this is one sort of mode through which we've ensured that our students get the best of perspectives on a certain subject area, or which may be not offered in their particular school. And we've had a student recently who graduated a year ago from our law school, the Jindal Global Law School, but decided after taking certain electives from the business school, made it to the Harvard School of Business. And just about yesterday or day before, we received our Vice Chancellor received a communication from one of the senior faculty members from the Harvard Business School saying that our student, who was earlier a law student, but then because of the kind of subjects that he studied at that were offered at the Jindal School of Business School, really sort of changed the course of his understanding and decision to explore other kinds of avenues in business and law. So I went down to the Harvard Business School and is doing phenomenally and exceptionally well. So you do cross electives, and an interdisciplinary approach to education does make a difference. The second thing that I would want all of you to also know is that at OP Jindal Global University, we're very conscious not just to create intra-institutional spaces for synergistic learning, but also we are very conscious of ensuring that our students get also exposure from the best of our international partners in various overseas universities abroad. So we have our internationalization process. Our Office of International Affairs and Global Initiatives is quite tasked with the objective of ensuring and expanding our global footprint to ensure that the best of exposure of courses which are brought and offered by our partnering institutions or collaborated with us. We have at the moment
Professor Hasnan, can you hear Professor Mercy?
No, I guess there is some network issue. Maybe.
Right. It's we'll just wait for perhaps maybe 10 more seconds and see if we can have Professor Deborah back.
Sure.
Otherwise, we'll proceed. Upma, in the meantime, can you please unshare the screen? Yeah. So as I can see, her screen is stuck. So in any case, I think Professor Deborah covered the aspect of interdisciplinary approach to our OP Jindal's training, curriculum, and pedagogy. What I would ask you, Professor Hasnan, is to elaborate on your experience, because you've been a student. So being a student, how was your experience, and how did you experience the interdisciplinarity at OP Jindal University?
Sure. Thank you for that question, because now I can give insights to the students who are listening. So yeah, as a student, when you enter in a university, you don't only look for a theoretical knowledge, but you first want to have some skills which will take you up to a job market. That is like a true story about a student. Because when we invest in education, we look for what is my ROI. Okay, knowledge is there, but then will I be placed? Will I get the employability is a big issue nowadays. So I would like people to know that when I was here as a student studying public policy, I got many opportunities as an internship and project based. I worked with member of parliaments in parliament assignment session, I used to write bill briefs for them. And more so, I was working with ASA, that is in education sector. It's a team of Pratham. They work in writing educational reports. So it's a very deemed organization, NGO, which works in this space. And when you look from outside, these are big, big names where you can just aspire to be, but you don't know if you will be able to make it or not. But yeah, JGU provides you that facility. They facilitate these things to you, and you are on those boards, which maybe at some point in time would have been a dream for a person. I also got an opportunity to work with Segal Foundation. This is a foundation in Gurgaon, and it works in the regions of Mewat. So for those who don't know what Mewat is, it is one of the districts, one of the most backward districts of India. So there's a report which states the 100 backward districts of India, and in that it is one. So I got the opportunity to work there, and that was a field-based work. I was supposed to do life skill vocational training centers. I was supposed to get engaged with that, and I got the opportunity because of JGU itself. And being an alumni of Delhi University also, I can bring in that the way JGU facilitates you these opportunities is way beyond a government institution will do. Take that my word, people, whoever is coming in Jindal will definitely agree to this thing, because these institutions are way beyond than what we can think of. So skill development we do have, and because of these internships and projects only, I could get recruited to these ministries where I have worked in, because of my not only academic achievements, but also the practical experience I got as a student over here. Moving further, I would like people to know that Jindal also gives you many international opportunity as a student. Like you can go, you can study whichever university you want to do for a semester. I also got an opportunity, though I was here, but then we were having a water governance course from University of Duke, that's in Illinois. So we were able to make it, and for me it was a big thing, because living in India and getting this is a big thing when you are not moving out as well, and but you get their perspectives. In the class we had people from different countries. So in my class there were people from Bhutan and Finland. So whenever teachers used to teach us any topic, it was really interesting to have their perspective, because to state that Bhutan works on happiness index of their citizens. So we had very interesting conversations in our class because of the crowd we have and the faculty. So the Jindal also have faculty from different parts around the world and from very, very reputed universities. That experience itself is like a big thing. Now, as Professor Mercy was talking about cross electives, I must say it gives you a real good experience. So I, being a public policy student, I was able to pursue a course, corporate social responsibility from business school. And it really gave me a leverage in designing and working during my stay with ministries, and I could pursue, because when you go out there in the world, they need you to be a fundraiser also, maybe at times, so that in the ground you can make it happen. So how do I do that? There is where business school helped me. So yeah, that's how JGU builds in. And public policy as a course itself is interdisciplinary. It has different components from different disciplines, and students can choose not the core, but the elective where they want to. I was a person who studied maths maybe till 10th, and after that I was done with maths. But coming to public policy, Jindal gave me the opportunity and handholded me with the maths and stats, and I had studied subjects like econometrics and stats, which were very, very far beyond my imagination, given that I used to be afraid of maths. But then their tutorials, their hand-holding support will definitely make you very good at versed in skills and knowledge. So that was my experience with Jindal. I hope I can make it through to the people.
Thank you so much, Professor Hasnan. And yes, indeed, hands-on learning, practical experiences, the essence of what we do at the Open University. Ma'am, Professor Deborah, we lost you for a bit, but you're back with us. So if you want to complete that point before we move to the question and answer session.
Yeah. So I'm sorry for the inconvenience at our audience. I was just making a point about how we are doing things at OP Jindal Global University. And we're sharing our experiences on, the interdisciplinary approaches and synergistic learning that we consciously and subconsciously integrate into our education ecosystem at the university. And we're sharing this with you, not just because we are, it's a work in progress, undoubtedly, but we also would, as educators, want to, share our experience and make it available to educators as well as prospective students who are exploring opportunities of studying various kinds of courses in various universities, including OP Jindal Global University. So one of the things that I said before there was a network issue at my end, is that we give our students an opportunity to adapt their curriculums. And I did mention about the range of cross-selectors that we have. And the second point that I was mentioning about is the kind of emphasis that we give to internationalization, and our Office of International Affairs and Global Initiatives, in fact, works constantly on increasing our global footprint in terms of ensuring that our students get the best of international exposure in a range of courses. And this primarily happens through three principal modes, which is our students are given opportunities of short-term study abroad programs, which typically happen over the summer semester break or a winter semester break. And they go to universities such as Harvard, Columbia, Oxford, and study specific subjects, which are offered exclusively to students at our university. So they can study, let's say a student wants to study, commercial and business laws in the United States of America about the US. They would enroll for the Columbia short-term study abroad program. We have a collaboration with the Harvard University, and particularly the Harvard School of Public Health, where students do a summer course in human rights and development. Likewise, we do have tie-ups with Oxford, where students study international law-related courses. And these typically, we ensure that our cohort of students who are going out for these short-term study programs is a diverse cohort, which consists of students in psychology, business, law, journalism, architecture, public policy, school, international affairs, because we do consider at the end of the day, a very diverse cohort works well, because when they come back, they're able to share different experiences with their peers in the classroom space. So the first mode through which we do interdisciplinary synergistic learning is promoted in the universities through giving exposure to our students through these short-term study abroad programs. We also have semester exchange programs where some of our meritorious students go to our partnering institutions and are able to pick up subjects which are very unique to these partnering institutions. And so they're able to integrate it with what they've learned at an Indian university like OP Jindal Global University, and they're able to, see the other side of the bookend of, let's say law, business, journalism, or, architecture, or whatever, range of courses that they may be studying at the university. These semester exchange programs enable them to look at the other perspective from in other extant jurisdictions. And of course, we have pathway programs through which our students are able to continue certain specific courses, and they're able to integrate them with their subject areas which are taught in our partnering institutions in host universities abroad. So we have currently more than 300 such collaborations which are already fructified, and there's still many collaborations in the pipeline. But we do ensure, the reason why we are stating this is because we cannot live in a cocoon anymore. It is absolutely essential that students in an education system get the best of exposure. Either we send them out through collaborations, or we have faculty members who are trained in some of these best of institutions to share their experiences from their country. So we have approximately more than 100 faculty members from various countries, including North America, US, Southern America, and other countries across the world, who come down, who are presently teaching at OP Jindal Global University. So they're able to get their unique perspectives from their home countries down to the classrooms, which really, sort of enriches the entire educational experience and indeed makes it a very edifying experience. And the third I wanted to talk about is about how we are doing, we also emphasize on experiential learning. One of the most important aspects of both the national education policy not just emphasizes now that we really need to put our heads together and ensure that our classrooms and our education universities and our centers of learning ensure that there's an integrative approach to knowledge and experience. And so here at OP Jindal Global University, we have been right from the start, even before internships and all these were made mandatory. We insist that our students get experiential learning, not just through their internships, which are mandatory to be undertaken during the semester breaks, but we also work on simultaneously on opening avenues whereby they can take field studies to ensure that what they learn in the classroom space, they're able to integrate it, their knowledge with their experiences from the field. So it's over to Spew Satyam, and we're happy to, both Professor Hasnain and I would be happy to take in a couple of questions from our audience.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We can just get rid of the slide. So we'll have, Upma, can you just unshare the screen? Now, quickly.
All right. Have we by any chance lost Satyam?
Hi, Professor. I think we have lost Satyam for a couple of seconds. Maybe in the meantime, he's coming back. I'll just put on a question to you, Professor Deborah and Professor Hasnain. We have a audience, Ms. Kavita. So she has requested for a question, how we can differentiate multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary approaches that we can adopt in higher education. Can you please quote some example and explain?
Okay. Yeah. So thank you for your question. And, I mean, we all grapple with this, with these issues related to nomenclatures being used. But I just want to sort of simplify that at the end of the day, when we're talking about interdisciplinary approach, transdisciplinary approach, or multidisciplinary approach, they pretty much, mean the same thing or can be interchangeably used. And so to do away with the problem of, nomenclatures being used, all these approaches in the education sector sort of thrive and, integrate, reinforce. So when you talk about integrative approaches or transdisciplinary approaches, let's say in a classroom space, if we were teaching about something as whether it's a school classroom or whether it's a university classroom, if we were teaching something about a pressing problem like climate change, it would require an educator or a teacher or a professor to not just, address theoretical approaches or theoretical concerns or basic practical concerns about the issue of climate change. But it is absolutely important to apprise and inform our students about what sort of issues arise if, let's say, climate change, which concerns everybody on this planet, on this third rock from the sun, if it sort of is a problem that everybody deals with. So if you had to bring something related to a climate change related issue, you would not just bring it from how we're tackling public policy issues such as how are we curbing upon our emission of gases, use of non-renewable sources of energy in our country. At the same time, you would say, how can we change our habits to adopt to a more sustainable system. At the same time, one needs to make students conscious about what are we're literally having a red notice as per, the international scenario. The developments demand that we take, we implement micro level as well as macro level changes. So when you address a problem, it's very important as an educator to be well aware of have a 360-degree sort of a overview on the subject area. Of course, there's sometimes difficulties that we, depending upon our area of specialization, may not be perfectly skilled to apprise and inform our students about certain subject areas. But as much as possible, I think you need to ensure, let's say the best possible way could be mediums, both visual mediums as well as, theoretical, print texts or important texts can be brought to the classroom to sort of drive home the message as to why is it such an urgent, pressing problem that affects each one of us here. Maybe I would request my colleague Zara Hasnain to weigh in on this question as well.
I would request Mr. Satyam to reiterate the question because I lost the connection and I didn't hear what question was. So
I think I also lost the connection for a bit, but
I may, just for the benefit of everybody, we had an audience member ask that, is there really any difference between integrative approaches, multidisciplinary approach or transdisciplinary approach? And, could we give an example of whether there's really a distinction or no? It's just a problem of nomenclature that we are giving. Could we probably, Professor Zara, from the point of view of public policy standpoint, would you have any examples as to how multiple perspectives can be brought in to address a certain issue?
Sure. I would like to give one analogy, I guess, and it will make sense to the person who's asking this. So let's imagine there is a kitchen and we get into the kitchen and there's a cutting board. We find few pieces of, say, strawberries on it. So this is a disciplinary thing. Now, on another cutting board, there is few pieces of, say, banana and apple. We just mix all these three and it becomes interdisciplinary. And if all these three, we take it into the jar blender and we make a shake of it, this happens to be trans. So I think I just made a distinction for the person who was asking. This is the only difference when you go through the course or even these terminologies for that matter. This is how you can just take it forward. So I think I made it clear. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am, can you hear me? So there was one question about policy. I don't know whether it has been addressed or not, but this was to do with how.
I did. I believe I did.
You already answered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but perhaps if you can just throw more light into how we already have a policy in place, but in terms of the intent and how can we as educators support the policy? And, if you can just throw a little bit more light in terms of its implementation.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So we as an educator, we are obsessed with the subject we are specialized in. So we keep talking about, supposedly if that is political science for me, so I'll keep talking about Plato and Aristotle, but seeing that the policies are in place, what they ask is, I should be able to relate these about the political thinkers to the present day society. And that is where it solves the purpose. The correlation should not only be restricted to students' mind that they will be drawing the correlations, but it should also be from the instructor's point of view that when we are talking about our themes, our subjects, we should be able to interconnect them with, say, the present day society or even with another subject which is taught, maybe economics or sociology in a particular department. We should be able to correlate it. And so it will help the student forming those interconnections.
Right. So we're clean out of time, but before we wind up, I would definitely ask Professor Deborah one last point, if she has any advice for students, especially who are looking forward to their higher education in terms of how to choose their discipline. And if you can just throw some light on that aspect, Professor.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be really delighted to, address this particular issue. And I think it's a very important issue that most of you prospective students and also your parents, also equally, a lot of parents equally invested in this process to ensure that you get the best of, learning opportunities. And one of the things that I would urge you is that at the heart of the matter is take up something that really kindles your imagination and that really sustains your attention. Undergraduate courses are not terminal. Some of them are professional degrees, but I would say even professional degrees are not terminal degrees, because the education is, you're a student for life, and you cannot say merely by completing a certain undergraduate degree or a postgraduate degree or a doctoral study, or now even doctoral studies are not enough. People do postdoctoral studies, and there's continues. But whatever be your quest in life or your area of interest, education is something which is an ongoing process. It's only that degrees acquaint you with certain kinds of skills. And it's very important as students at the school level right now to understand that no matter which field or area you decide to specialize in, there is no possibility anymore of studying your area of specialization in silos or in complete isolation without reading up on the other allied areas which may affect and interact with your subject. All right. So one thing that I would really urge students, and I do urge my students every day almost in the classroom, and I force them to think, is about what sort of, you need to keep your mind open and just about read all the allied areas that may, feed into your area of specialization. Because at the end of the day, you need to be, you do want to be a specialist, but it's also equally important to be a generalist also. So that I would really urge each of you to keep your mind open, while you really certainly need to look out for your course or an area of specialization which kindles your interest and which sustains your interest for a long, long time. But also look at education and degrees as not terminal degrees, because it's an ongoing process, whether you're a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or a chartered accountant or in business. It is an ongoing process of learning and unlearning. Even as educators, the COVID pandemic threw its own set of challenges, and you would have seen your teachers as well as our students or us at the university level trying to get on the technology cart. So that we were able to make the best possible educational and learning interventions. So keep that at the back of your mind as you will be progressing in life and exploring opportunities and selecting your courses. We would really urge you to be conscious of the fact that learning process never dies down. It is a continuous. You're a student for life, and that is something that you must bear in mind.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday. Of course, this time is limited, and this is an ongoing process. We'll continue to host events for you. In case you have any questions and queries for us, we'll be very happy to answer. In fact, there are some questions which are not in particularly linked to this topic. That's why we have not answered, but you can write to us on the emails. We'd love to speak to you. And ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate the 75th Independence Day, I just want to highlight one factor, that we're not even 15 years old, but the university has stood as the #1 private university 3 years in a row. And as ma'am was talking in terms of its adaptability of digital learning, the QS iGauge rating has given us diamond rating because of our implementation of classroom examination and internships online. In fact, the kind of collaborations that we have, many a times we have online lectures as well. So that is again adaptability, but then again the quality of education is where we have made no compromise, and as a result we have stood as #1 private university. We would love to host you in the campus. If you want to visit us, if you come with your parents or anybody, we'd love to host you and show you the campus. You can talk to our faculty and students. And if you are in 12th, definitely you should apply for a range of courses. We have around 55 undergraduate course and around 20 post-graduation course. And as a research institute, we offer doctoral studies as well. Please stay tuned to our social media handles. In fact, let me tell you that most of our Instagram pages are indeed run by students. We have around 50 student-led societies, and they do a lot of activities. So you can go follow them and stay tuned for many online and offline events that we keep organizing. Follow us on Twitter and wait for a host of good events which will intellectually nourish you and also give you a lot of insights about various topics. As a university with 12 schools, 12 Center of Excellence, this is another benefit that any student gets, that once they come here, they have access to 11 other schools. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll wind up this webinar. Thank you so much once again for joining us, and we'll see you around in the next event. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Hasnan, and thank you, Professor Debra.
Thank you. And we look forward to connecting with all our audience and our prospective students. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Hello. Hello.
Please stop.
Sir, live बंद कर दें?
Yes.